Stay right where you are.
Extra chatter for your binge. This is a podcast-exclusive episode of Chatterbinge.
This is Chatterbinge.
It is a show that has transcended generations and permeated our pop culture in a way few works of American television ever could or ever did. 6 notes of music. Dun 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 dun. Timeless phrases such as pork chops and applesauce. Something suddenly came up. Oh, my nose. Mom always said don't play ball in the house. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. They are all from the Brady scripture. The Brady Bunch, and all things Brady, truly an American original.
And he is also an American original. In addition to his work in television, he takes pride in his contributions to live theater, where his passion shows for compelling narratives.
It is great to say hello to producer and writer Lloyd Schwartz. Lloyd, welcome to Chatterbinge.
Well, hello, Ed, and hello, Caryn.
Hello, Lloyd. Okay, jumping straight in, Lloyd Schwartz. Do you think, given your upbringing, that you were absolutely just doomed to go into showbiz?
I think so. I was always writing in high school, and college, and had degrees in that. I was going to be an English teacher. And then I started being as a dialogue coach with Dad, and I started doing some stand-up. And it came easy. And I never understood why anybody else didn't do this. This was the norm for me.
Right. This is what you grew up with. And if we back it up for our listeners, so they know, you're a young man growing up with your sister Hope in this showbiz family. Your dad, Sherwood Schwartz, created Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch. And when you were watching this as a young man, what were you thinking? You're saying this was the norm, but how did it influence you? Did it just become second nature? That's just the way the world is?
I think so. And it wasn't just my dad. My uncles, they started off in radio, and then they wrote in television, they wrote for Groucho Marx and Milton Berle and Jackie Gleason, and Dad wrote Red Skelton. So I think my first understanding of it was when Dad was writing Red Skelton. So that was in the 50s. And so he would come, he was a regular dad. He'd come home, and he didn't really bring show business into the family. He was a dad. But then when we'd watch Red Skelton at home, and it was live, and he'd be in anguish because Red Skelton ad-libbed a lot. And Dad said, no, wait, that wasn't the line. But and then I met him, and then I started going onto the sets of he did I Married Joan and My Favorite Martian, and then when he did Gilligan, and I was still Gilligan's came out in '63, and I'd go to the set and I'd watch that, and then I went into college and I started studying television, and I wrote away from him. I was working. I wrote Love American Style when I was in college. And then it just went that way. And then for Brady Bunch, I was doing stand-up, and then Dad said he was doing this Brady Bunch show. Would I work on it? Because I had done dialogue coach for him before. And I said, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And he said, well, who should do it? And I said, well, somebody who's worked, in the dialogue coach before. And he said, you did. Someone who's worked with kids. And he said, well, you ran a summer. I ran a summer camp for a while. Someone who has a degree in writing, and I did that. I said, okay, I'll do it.
You were eminently qualified. I love that. And, you said something a moment ago that I think is terrific. You talked about your college education, but you talked about the education before that, on being on these sets, on being on the set of I Married Joan, of My Favorite Martian, and seeing and understanding and getting that visceral education into how this industry worked. So then when that time rolls around and here comes the Brady Bunch and you get involved in that. And I think about this show, Lloyd, and I think about how during that time, TV evolved such a great deal during the run of the Brady Bunch from 1969 to 1974. TV essentially went from Green Acres to Archie Bunker during that time. Yet the Brady Bunch was able to bridge that change, and it always remained true to itself. Why did the show work?
Well, I think it was one of the first half-hour comedies. First of all, that was in color, and that talked about it from the point of view of the kids. It didn't deal with big issues. It dealt with issues that everybody knew about, felt comfortable with. And the why it worked first of all, it didn't work during its original run. It was just barely hanging on. But it became a huge success when syndication.
Mm-hmm.
See, kids would come home from school and they'd watch it 2 or 3 times. And so it evolved into a thing where everybody knew every episode. Now, every producer likes to think that all people know all their episodes. But in Brady Bunch case, they just do. I mean, I'll give you an example. When Barack Obama was running for president the first time, he introduced his wife as, "This is my wife who knows every episode of the Brady Bunch." And she does.
I turn it on within literally like 4 seconds. I know what episode it is. And you talked about the syndication run, and that's so important. I was of that age. I'd come home from school. I'd turn on the TV on Channel 5 in New York when it was in syndication, and I would start my homework, and in the background I'd hear dun 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 dun, the scene setting music as the episode would start. So to me, my education in school goes hand in hand with the soundtrack of the Brady Bunch in the background, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Ed Kalegi is a little bit of a freak. He does know all the details of the Brady Bunch.
At this point, he probably knows more than I do, because I don't watch it all the time. But, you know, Dad was interesting when Dad wrote the theme song too, and he felt that he wanted something that would grab people from the other room. So, you know, so when that theme song started, people knew what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would run in and watch it, you know.
Wow. I did not know that fact. And
well, you just stick with me, Caryn. You're going to hear such stuff.
It makes such sense. And that's a fabulous, fun little tidbit about the Brady Bunch.
That's right.
But I have had the pleasure of marrying into the Brady Bunch. Thank you, Lloyd Schwartz. I married Greg Brady in one of the incarnations, which we will talk about in a few minutes.
Sure.
But I have, by proxy, sort of experienced what those fans feel about the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
How much they love it, how much it meant to them as children. So if I were to say to you, why do you, Lloyd Schwartz, think that this show matters so much to the audiences?
Dad and I had this discussion. And I said, because we were trying to figure out why it was like addictive.
Yeah.
And so I finally asked him, I had to say it point blank to him, did you put some kind of chemical in the film that made it addictive? Was that what happened?
And what did he say?
He said, yes, no. Look, he didn't really have an answer for that. A lot of times he would just say to himself, why this show? And some of it I explained before. It was because it was several doses of it all the time. In fact, ABC at the time wasn't a full network. It didn't go 24 hours or whatever. It gave to local. And it was the first time that they did this. They syndicated the show. ABC itself did. And so I think that's what made it so accessible.
But don't you think, I know I've heard fans say, I didn't have a happy childhood.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Brady Bunch was my happy childhood, that I watched that show. And that's more what I'm thinking of. That is so powerful.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
You're right. We would get letters from kids saying they were going to leave their homes to come and move into the Brady Bunch.
Wow.
And one letter said, there's so many kids you probably wouldn't even know I was there. You know? No, but Dad would always write letters to the parents. Do you know that this is what your kid is planning? You know, just to stop them from doing this. You know,
He would literally write them back himself.
Did
Did
like
he?
the parents. Yeah.
Wow. That's a statement about your dad,
It
isn't
is.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, Caryn, he was a very, very kind man, and for the most part, Mike Brady is who my dad was. And the philosophies expressed in the show were basically his views of parenting.
Well, may I just say that the apple did not fall far from the tree,
That's
because
right.
I experience you very much that way. And again, for our audiences listening, because I had the pleasure, and I'm repeating myself, of working with you, not just on the Brady Bunch. I did a wonderful play that you wrote subsequently, not too long ago. But you guide and direct and just exist in a very similar way to the way I experienced your dad. And I think that's quite a legacy that he left for you.
It was interesting. So I only worked with him for a while in terms of television. And so then I took I was asked to work as an executive at ABC. And so one of the reasons I took that job, and I was the first guy to go from working as a producer, I was the youngest producer, and then over to ABC, I was the first guy to go from being a producer to being a network executive. A lot of times it goes the other way. And so one of the reasons I did that is I wanted to work with other producers, because how do they work? And I worked with some of the very biggest ones, Gary Marshall's, without indicting some of these people on how they work. But I learned, surprisingly, that my dad was the best producer. And I didn't expect that. But he thought not only about the show, but about the people all the time. Those were the two important things.
When I think about the show, and I think about how the show changed a bit, and it grew over the years, and I think about season 1 to season 2. Season 2 brought some change, some subtle change. First of all, even with the theme song, Lloyd, in season 1, it was performed by the Peppermint Trolley Company, and then season 2 and beyond, it's by the Brady kids. And also what I seemed to pick up was that season 2 and thereafter seemed to focus more on the kids, less on the parents. And it seemed to take the show away from the conventional mom, dad, and then the kids to more of the kids and then the mom and dad concept. And it gave the show a very unique feel. How intentional was that?
During the beginning of the show, here's the story of a man named Brady. And Dad believed it was going to be about the parents and how the kids affected their lives. And he began to understand that kids don't affect the parents' life. The parents can affect the kids' life. So he made the show about the kids. And it was my idea, I'll take credit for that, to have the Brady kids sing the song and change it to, that's the way we became the Brady Bunch. That was an interesting day because I went over to run the music session there, and the kids are all there, and they said to me, well, who's the conductor? Who's going to run the music? I said, I am. And he said, have you done this before? I said, no. He said, what about the harmonies? I said, not going to be any harmony. What? I said, these are kids. They're just going to sing it. That's the way it's going to be. And so that was. And then, as you're right, in the second year of the show, not only that, but the kids, each episode would feature one of the kids, and the problems in the other kids would fit into it. And so that was the future of the series.
And it changed it, I think, in a wonderful way. And literally, just before we had you on today, I'm watching an old episode. My favorite episode is the Greg Brady meets Don Drysdale episode. Don Drysdale shows him his special sinker. Greg never gets anybody else out for the rest of his career. Don Drysdale ruined Greg Brady's pitching career. And all these years, I've carried that burden on my shoulders, and I can finally unburden that today. So thank you.
See, I told you, Ed Kalegi knows everything.
All right, well, you don't know that I had to find Don Drysdale. I had to call different major baseball stars to get one of them to do the show. And it was fascinating. I was 25 or something at the time. And I called Willie Mays. I talked to Willie Mays, and I talked to Maury Wills, and I don't know, maybe somebody else. What was fascinating to me was that they were very nervous, these guys talking to me.
Really?
Because they were out of their element.
Yeah.
I was asking them to act in something. And so I said, wasn't that fascinating? And then we got Drysdale. And
then Drysdale went on to become pretty much a legendary sports announcer. He was the Angels play-by-play guy for a number of years. Dodgers. He went to the White Sox. Yeah, Dodgers. And he was with the Dodgers when he passed away, unfortunately, in 1993. But he became a network announcer with ABC. So he went on to a storied sportscasting career. I got to ask you this. I told you my favorite episode. What's your favorite episode?
It's always Bobby's hero, when his hero was Jesse James.
Ah, yep.
I'll tell you about that. First of all, Mary Anti-Gun. In the show, at the end of that show, he turns in his cap guns to his parents. There's a scene in there where it's a dream sequence where Bobby's hero is Jesse James, and the Brady family is all on this railroad car. And they're kind of going like this, you can't see me, I'm on radio, but I'm jumping up and down for the radio people.
And he's doing a good job at it, too.
Okay, so the train's going along. Guy comes in and says, I'm Jesse James, and I rob banks. And he pulls out a fake big cardboard gun. And he says, and he shoots all the Brady people, who all die in very funny manner. Oh, bang, 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 like that. And I said, and I went to the welfare worker, Frances, who was a great lady, and I said, look, I want to do this with no rehearsal. And I want Mike Lookinland, playing Bobby, to see what it would look like if his parents were actually being shot in his head. So I talked to him on what that would look like. And first I had to clear with the welfare worker because I'm playing with his head a little bit. And you watch that scene sometime. I know you will. But watch that scene, and it kind of tears itself apart because the horror in Mike Lookinland, Bobby, seeing his family being shot. And so we did that, and that's really one of my favorite episodes because it makes a real point. Then, of course, I took him away, and I had to debrief him for a while to bring him down.
Sure.
But
How old was he at the time? How old was he when he was shooting?
I would say probably maybe 9, something like that.
Wow.
And the welfare worker, she was great, and she agreed with me. It was an important thing to do.
So it was delicate in a certain way, working with the kids. And again, I have the luxury of knowing them, some better than others. I've heard Christopher Knight and Barry Williams talk, at length about what that atmosphere was. And Christopher Knight in particular always talks about the fact that they all grew up together. And you were a family, and you, Lloyd Schwartz, were a daddy of sorts, to a certain extent. What was that like? Because I know you protected them, you created this wholesome environment, you were really conscious of their well-being. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I won't say I was a daddy. I think I was an uncle.
Okay. I don't mean a real daddy, but you...
No, my dad was like the real daddy.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was interesting because when Dad said, here are these 6 kids, and I was supposed to be the dialogue coach, he didn't tell me how to do it. And so we just talked about, a lot of things outside just the lines, and using that as an impetus for discussing how they would feel about each of these things. And then they would, and they had full freedom to rewrite lines if it didn't feel like that they would be saying them. And so we did that. And then I was a bachelor at the time. I would go to each kid was featured in an episode, and I would go to the home of the kid, and I would get a free meal. Which was great.
Yeah. You're no fool.
And then we talk about it, the scene and how that would affect them. And then we had a lot of discussions about, fame and what that was and what their responsibility was. When we went to Cincinnati. Ed, you may know that I acted in that episode.
You're the bear. You're the bear in that episode. See, I know my stuff.
Unbelievable.
I was brilliant. But
why you did not get the Emmy still mystifies me to this day.
But when we were there, this was in Cincinnati, and that was the first time they were in a big public thing, and there was crowds all over trying to see him and stuff. And they would laugh about that. A couple of them said they weren't them, and they would use fake names and stuff. But we talked about it. I said, look, fame is a responsibility, Caryn. You know that.
Yeah.
How you present yourself in public. And I said, imagine if you weren't who you are and you looked just like you, how awful that would be. Everybody coming up and saying, aren't you, like
sure.
that. And we talked about that. And I'm proud of the adults they've all become. Some of them have more tribulations and things, but in a lot of TV shows, and I worked on some of those, and the actors are not alive anymore.
Right.
Because of serious problems. But Dad always, he said, we keep the kids, the actors first, along with the show. And that was kind of how we handled that.
And they did, in fact, grow up together. What was it like for you and your dad to see them sort of, become adolescents and start to flirt with each other and all that entails as hormones start flowing?
I saw that as part of my job, to throw water on it. I remember taking Barry aside because he started to get interested in Maureen. I go, now look, Barry, she's a very pretty girl. And pretty girls have good, pretty friends. So what you want to do is you want to use Maureen to get to her friends. This was one of my plans. But I also blew it completely one time. We were in Hawaii, and there was a woman I got interested in Hawaii, and I thought I would impress her by saying that I knew the Brady Bunch, because I worked in the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, so I took them all on a moonlight walk on the beach, and they kind of paired up. This was a mistake on my part. It was a mistake done selfishly.
Wow.
But they paired up age appropriately?
Oh, yes.
Ah.
I think I've heard Barrett talk about this, actually. It was sort of the perfect unions there. That's
sure. Well, then I directed an episode called Room at the Top.
Yep.
And that was in the fifth year or fourth year. Anyway, Barry was very interested in Maureen, and they were interested in each other. And there's a scene where it was the first scene I directed ever on television, and Barry comes into the girls' room because they're fighting over the attic room. Who's going to get it? And he sits down on the bed next to her. And I'm directing this scene, and it's going well. All the dialogue is right, and then I notice that it's pretty steamy between the brother and the sister. And I said, "Cut! Everybody's ready to move on. The crew doesn't care. They just want to move on to the next scene. But I can't let this happen." And so I cut. It was the only time I think we went 13 takes.
Wow.
And usually on television you go 4 takes, or something like that. 13 and I'm the only one who saw the problem. And then I remembered a class I took at UCLA talked about psychic distance. And I said, Barry, it's not working. I want to change the blocking. Why don't you put your arm here, which created a distance between the two of them, and that's how it ended up working.
See, you figured it out. What I thought was very cool is that little element of Greg and Marcia kind of having a little thing together. That ended up being one of the subplots in one of the 90s Brady's movies, which I loved very much. And these Brady movies of the mid-90s, they satirized the show itself. And I always thought it was to your credit that there were many creative people, Lloyd, that would not allow that approach to be taken with their baby, so to speak. So why was that time right to take sort of even that caricature approach with the Brady franchise? Why was it right to do that then?
Okay. Well, it was right in the first way that a lot of movies were being done based upon 60s television show. Paramount, at that time, the president was Brandon Tartikoff, who we knew pretty well. I'd done movies with him. I was executive with him at the networks and stuff. And he called up Dad. He said, I want to do a Brady Bunch. And so Dad and I got together. We said, there's no movie. There's 6 kids in a house. This is not a movie. I said, unless we do it as a satire. So it was our idea.
Oh.
So we called up Paramount and we said, we'll do a Brady Bunch movie, but it has to be a satire. And Brandon in his wisdom said, maybe not in his wisdom, he said, I don't care. He said, because he felt the Brady Bunch movie was enough. There were so many bad movies that were done that way. So we wanted to do a movie, it was an affectionate satire. That's what we called it. We wanted people that loved the Brady Bunch to like the satire, and people who hated the Brady Bunch to also like the satire. And that's what happened. A lot of trials and tribulations in between of fighting with the studio and the network, all that kind of thing. But it ended up the tone that we wanted.
Gary Cole told me a few months ago that was one of the most fun roles he ever had of doing Mike Brady and doing Mike Brady in the way that he did. He got such a kick out of that.
Barry's a very good guy. And I worked, I produced those movies too.
Yep.
So I worked with Gary and Shelley, and I thought that both of them were really terrific. However, at the beginning, I wanted not that kind of casting. And this was one of the fights. I didn't want people to do impressions. I wanted Madonna as Mrs. Brady. And I thought that would have been really terrific. But it went this other way, and it worked out very well.
It did.
Wait. I have to just stop you for a second. Because Madonna as Carol Brady, can you go a little deeper into that thought process? Because I am not... I don't know.
You've blown her away, Lloyd. The synapses are not firing the right way right now.
Well, because I'm not seeing that, so I'm wanting to understand what you were thinking.
Well, she plays it as straight as she can, and the added element is it's Madonna. So the audience would be laughing at that and laughing at the satire of Brady. See, Shelley Long studied Carol Brady.
And she did.
Yes.
And as did Gary with Mike Brady. But I just wanted Madonna to be Madonna and saying these things. I wanted Kevin Nealon as Mike Brady. So just
interesting.
I could see that.
It was, look, it was a choice, and it ended up very well. I mean, we had written our own script that was different than that, and then there was I'm not getting the whole history of all this, but
yeah,
they had greenlit the script that Dad and I had written, which was a satire, and then they changed presidents at NBC and at Paramount, and they threw out the script without reading it. The new president. I went to the executive. I said, "Hey, look, we had a green light. It was everybody loved everything." And he said, "Yes, can you get her to read the coverage?" Because they just discussed it and why it should be done and all that.
Right.
And this executive said there was no coverage.
Wow.
They threw it out. They had to pretend that it wasn't there because they had to, it's very Trumpian. They had to agree with the president of the studio.
Yeah. Wow.
I love hearing the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
There are things that I'm hearing you say. Obviously, we've known each other for a number of years. There's things that I didn't know. I also know that there's so many other things to talk about, but it's really hard to get off the Brady Bunch. So I hope you're okay with me asking this question, because I need to ask you about the Brady spouses and the different incarnations. So I got to marry Greg Brady in A Very Brady Christmas, the movie of the week, and play his wife in the subsequent series, The Bradys. But there were a lot of incarnations of the Brady Bunch, the Brady Brides, all of it. Did you know ahead of time, did you have this feeling that that was going to be a successful plan, or were you hoping?
It started with the Brady Girls Get Married.
Right.
And I wanted it to actually, in between, somewhere in there was the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, which I had nothing to do with.
Okay.
Nothing to do with it. I'll even tell you this. I read about the Brady Bunch Variety Hour yesterday on Facebook.
Yeah.
Somebody put out the question, what would you rather do than see the Millennium movie? Okay. and they had some really, I give myself a vasectomy. They had all these kind of things. And one person said, binge the Brady Bunch Variety Hour.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my gosh.
The swimming pool, the whole thing.
I had nothing to do with
Lloyd,
that
I
show.
still don't know what the hell was going on there. I'll leave it at that.
I only saw half of one. I just couldn't watch it.
Amen.
Anyway, so we're going to do Brady Girls. I wanted to do a show about the Brady Girls. And I presented it, and it evolved into the Brady Girls Get Married. I want to do the Brady Girls where they go to New York and something or other. But this was what they wanted to do, and that was great. And so we did that.
So then by the time you got to A Very Brady Christmas,
Right.
You had already cast a number of the spouses, but there were some left undone, as was the case with Greg Brady. How is it for you to find their mates? I've always wanted to ask you that.
Okay. All right. Well, you know my story about you, Caryn.
Yes, I told that to Ed.
Yes, I've heard this story. Yes. This is very interesting. Yes.
Okay.
I gave a bad audition and you hired me anyway.
Okay. Yes. And it was interesting. So we were casting, and we have to see like many people.
Yeah.
And so Caryn came in. I'm not sure if I said I want to see the girl who did Gidget or not, or I don't know about you. You were in the office. And she really didn't do a good audition.
It's horrifying.
Why? What was so bad about it? Why?
Yes, what was?
Yes,
I don't
please.
know. It just didn't click or something. And so now we're getting ready to select the ones. And I said, I want Caryn Richman. And my dad is there, and the casting director go, what? And I said, you saw her audition. I said, yeah, but that wasn't her audition. I watched Gidget. And Gidget was her audition. And that's the person. I don't care whether her audition was like this. But if anybody could do that, I said, that was what I wanted.
There you go.
So that was what Caryn got.
Lloyd, I know we're doing this on our Chatterbinge show, but you know what? I never heard you say that.
Yeah.
When we've laughed about it, I teach, and I've told my students this story because it's so insanely valuable. to know that it's not always about doing the best job. And in my defense, I'm sure I was nervous. I was not a good...
Meeting me must have made you...
It did. It threw me. It was also the process of auditioning is really not what you do as an actor. It's a whole different skill. And clearly I wasn't very good at it. So publicly, I need to say thank you for believing in me, because that was, I mean, being a part of the Brady Bunch continues to be one of the greatest things I've done in my career. Yeah. So thank you for believing in me. And we don't have to be that indulgent. Oh my gosh, we're going to run out of time. I'm not really clear.
But I think this is wonderful because, Lloyd, you just said something that's so important, because you said, I want what I saw in Gidget. So she actually had 2 years of a series that was an audition for the Bradys.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah.
And I love that. And I love the fact that you don't live and die with that tiny little audition when you have a body of work behind you that made them cognizant of you in the first place. And I think that is great. And that Christmas movie was so well received, and it led to the Bradys. And I have to tell you this. I was working at a marketing firm at that time, and there were a lot of Brady nuts in that company. And when that show premiered, this is the God's honest truth, we would get a pizza. We would get a 12-inch black and white TV out of the back room. We set it up. We would sit there for those 5 glorious Friday nights, and we watched the Bradys. And we watched that show, and we loved how those characters were updated. And we knew what they were doing in their adult life. And it wasn't all funny stuff. There was serious stuff blended in as well. And I loved that show. What was the inspiration for doing that show that way?
Well, we wanted to do 2-hour movies. Like the Brady Christmas was a 2-hour movie. And we wanted to do them about one every 6 months and have everybody drop in to see how the Bradys are going along. But the network doesn't, their bread and butter is series. And they were doing very badly at the time. And because Brady Christmas had a huge rating, they said, let's just make this hours. And we said, you know, the Bradys, well, I always call it Brady something because it was like 30 something.
Right.
And then we didn't have kids. We had adult kids. We had the kids, so the Brady kids were adults. And so we had to deal with adult problems. Now the network in their non-wisdom put it on at 8 o'clock. So the first one was a 2-hour, it was kicked off with a 2-hour thing, but starting at 8 o'clock. And it was against like Full House on ABC. So we weren't going to get the rating. And I knew this in my soul. I knew that was not going to work if they did it this way. And they did it that way. And I remember walking with I was the executive producer. And I walked with him and I said, you know, this isn't going to work. I said, I hope America makes it work. I hope America tunes in, but I don't think they're going to. And they didn't. It should have been the 2-hour movies and we would still be doing them.
Yeah. You know? It would have been nice to check in with the Bradys periodically with those 2-hour movies, because James Garner was doing the same thing with the Rockford Files around that time. He was coming back with CBS and he was doing those 2-hour movies, and it was great to come in and out of that universe again. I think if you had those 2-hour movies periodically placed like Peter Falk did with Columbo then over on ABC, I think that would have worked incredibly well.
Well, you know, I'm sorry you weren't at the network at the time.
Me too.
Yes, you definitely should have been. I remember when we got notice that we were being canceled. I think we had the expectation that the Bradys was going to go for 13 or 12, and we were all very sad. But what a set, what a fun time that was. And
yeah, it was.
Thank you for hiring me in spite of my... I want to ask you about your work in theater. I know that you and Barbara, your lovely wife, are very, very involved in Theater West, in Studio City, in Los Angeles, children's theater. You've written plays. I have been lucky enough to do one of them. Can you talk a bit about that? How is that for you compared to television writing? It's such a, you know, your pride and joy to a certain extent. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you talk. Here we go.
Well, I had never done any theater, and Ann B. Davis from Brady Bunch was doing dinner theater. And so Barbara and I went to see her do a play, and it was terrible. The play was terrible. And I said, why are you doing this awful play? She said, well, nobody's ever written a play for dinner theater. It was dinner theater. I said, well, I'll write you a play. And then I wrote a dinner theater play, and I had the best time. And it played all around the country, and Ann did it, and Esther Roll did it. It was great fun. And so since that time, I've done at least a play a year. I've had like 45 plays produced, something like that. And then Barbara, who came from my wife came from Minneapolis Children's Theater, and we had a son who at that time was 3, and we took him to Children's Theater, and we couldn't find any we liked. And so she said, let's do a play. And I said, okay. So we write Little Red Riding Hood, and she was in it, and Jerry was in it, Jerry Hauser, great, and Ron Kuhlman from Brady was in it. He played the woodcutter, and Jerry played the wolf, when we did this. And it was very successful at a park. And Theater West came, and they said, would you consider doing it over here? And so we went over to Theater West, and we did it there, and it was a big success. And they said, would you do a season? And I hadn't thought about writing anything more than one children's play. And I came up with a song, their own musical. So I came up with a song in the shower. And I said, okay, there's another one. And so now we've done 18 different ones.
Wow.
And I've written all of them. And we just celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Children's Theater. We do it every Saturday. It's a great joy. And then I've done a bunch of other plays, including a Brady Bunch musical that probably was going to have a new life to it now, and a Gilligan musical. And I've written one-man show on John Wilkes Booth. And I wrote a one-woman show on a lady named Mary Walker, Dr. Mary Walker. She's the only woman to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. Mm-hmm. And that plays around the country, and they're making a big movie out of that, for Walden. So I love theater, and I love the challenges of it, and there have been musicals. I just did a musical on Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and their friendship. I've been lucky. I've been lucky in my career to do everything in every medium.
Yeah.
Yeah. And theater is so organic, Lloyd. It's so different because every single performance is different from every other performance before that. And I'm an old theater actor from a long time ago. And for you, you work on the sound stage for all those years. But when you're up on the boards and you're working with actors in that environment and the immediacy, there is an energy that comes from theater that does not come from any other aspect of performing.
You're 100% right. I would rather do theater. I'd rather do theater and independent movies. I don't like fighting the battles with,
Yeah.
I have an independent movie that's winning a bunch of festivals right now called Love and Taxes. And it's, it's
like
about a woman goes to her accountant. It's like same time next year. So their relationship is.
Oh, okay.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's good. And sadly, the star of it is Jake Reiner. And we were together the day before his parents were.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a wonderful guy, and his whole life is completely turned upside down.
Sure. Very horrible story, I know. I would be remiss if I didn't finish things up by asking you about the Brady house. Because when I was out in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, I'm on my way to the airport, and I hear from Caryn Richman. Caryn Richman is on her way to some hearing about the Brady house in Studio City, California. Lloyd, I got to tell you something. Before I shed this mortal coil and go to my reward, whatever it may be, I want to see that house at some point. I've driven by it and taken pictures like some tourist because that's how I am. That was years ago. But again, this wonderful place in Studio City, California. What is going on with the Brady house?
Well, it was just a stock shot. Dad was driving around Studio City and he said, that's the house. And then they went up and they made a deal and it was just a stock shot. So then years later, the house came up for sale and Discovery Network said, what we should do here is let's buy the house, turn the inside of it into exactly what the soundstage, the set on the original Brady house is only one story. And so we hung a window on it to make it look like a 2-story house. So then they had to take that 1-story house and turn it into a 2-story house for the very Brady renovation, which was again, very high rated. And so then what are we going to do with it after that? Well, a charming woman named Tina bought it, and she bought it and she loves it. And so she's made it even more Brady. I mean, all the details are exactly what the show was like. And so now the city decided, they all decided that we would make the Brady house a historical monument. And so that's what Caryn was at, and I was at, and we'd speak a little bit about it. And we thought they were just going to make the outside a historical monument. It's the second most photographed house in the United States.
Wow.
Number one being the White House. But the commission went and did a tour of the Brady house inside. And so we only wanted the outside, but they said, let's make the whole thing. And there was a vote, and it looks like that's what's going to happen.
Terrific. That's awesome. I love that. And the way Tina has meticulously recreated episodes in that house, when you go into the laundry room, there is a box of safe soap powder in there. There is the stuffed goat from Coolidge High School up in Greg's room in the attic. These little nuggets of Brady gold that you find in this house. She has meticulously loved that house. And it's a wonderful testament to the work that you've done over the years with this franchise that your dad has done. It's a wonderful American story on so many different levels.
Well, yes, I've learned to accept that.
Yeah. I think the entire Brady Bunch clan has learned to accept that. And I use this word in regard to your dad, but what a legacy for all of you. The Brady Bunch, the show that continues on. I know we have to stop here. I hope that we have a chance to talk again. I just want to say thank you so much on a personal level and certainly on behalf of Ed and myself. And I'm just going to say, Lloyd Schwartz, thank you so much for joining us here on Chatterbinge.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'm Ed Kalegi.
And I'm Caryn Richman. And this is Chatterbinge.
Don't try this at home. Ed and Caryn are professionally trained communicators.
This is Chatterbinge.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can always catch our best guest conversations and segments right here on the YouTube home of Chatterbinge.